Welcome to Sleep Peacefully. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Nicole. Thank you all for watching tonight's show. In this warm moment, we will immerse ourselves in an ancient and wonderful story, the dreamy legend about Beauty and the Beast. Imagine it's a perfect fall day, with the wind gently blowing through the treetops and the leaves dancing in the breeze, bringing you peace and pleasantness. Now, let's step into this fantastic story together to help you drift off to sleep. Before starting, please find a comfortable position and try to put down all distracting thoughts. Feel the relaxation in your body and let the uneasy emotions slowly leave. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, let every exhale take away a piece of fatigue, and let your body gradually calm down. As the program progresses, you can focus on your breathing. Feel the flow of air and let every breath be like a slowly flowing stream, guiding you towards a peaceful night. If you've ever had trouble sleeping at night or struggled to sleep amid the hustle and bustle of the day, don't worry. I understand because I've been through moments like this myself. During those troubled nights, I gradually learned to calm myself down and not let stress take over my heart. Yes, a difficult night can make the next day a little challenging, but approaching it positively can lead to more clarity. Remember, as you listen to the story tonight, you can use your breath to help you relieve stress and relax tension and anxiety. This is a simple yet effective method that helps calm your nervous system and guide you into a wonderful night's sleep. Okay, let's start tonight's story. An ancient legend like a dream, as old as this story is, it is full of magic and warmth. Our story begins with a businessman named Laurent who staked all his fortune on a fleet of ships. However, during the sea journey, he lost everything. The widower didn't have to take the news back to his wife, but he did have 6 children. As the debt gradually increased, the Laurent family began to experience earth-shaking changes. The 6 children, once accustomed to a luxurious life, were shocked when they learned that their family was penniless. Rumors fly, and the family's relative privilege becomes increasingly out of reach. Day after day, week after week, the ship they were waiting for never showed up in port. In order to cope with the increasingly difficult situation, the businessman had to start selling his exquisite furniture, luxury carriages, and even his daughter's jewelry and expensive dresses. In the end, they had to give up the luxurious mansion and leave their past life. The businessman often goes out, visiting business acquaintances, trying to find partners who will invest in his travels and help him rebuild his business. And the 3 boys and 3 girls who were left behind were forced to run the house themselves, despite being effectively adults. However, most of the 6 children had little use in terms of practical skills because they had become accustomed to superior living and learning luxuries. Camille is the youngest daughter in the family. Since there are no servants in the family, she is now most willing to do housework. Maybe it's because she's more impressionable. Maybe it's because she has a sweeter, more determined demeanor. No matter what Camille did, she always tries her best to learn housekeeping skills, even some skills that foreigners like. Camille looks to the villagers for unusual skills such as baking, sowing seeds, gardening, and raising chickens. Her efforts and vigilance turned into true love, and she began to gradually gain the respect of the villagers. However, her 5 older siblings made no effort to adapt to their new life, prove their abilities, or please the neighbors who might have helped them. Camille became the glue for Laurent's family. Through her efforts, she worked to ensure they had a tidy home and food to eat every day. The family has persisted in this life for nearly 2 years. Although life is difficult, there has been some improvement. However, one day, they finally received a piece of news that made them happy. The long missing ship actually appeared in the port, and most of the cargo on the ship was intact. The family has persisted in this life for nearly 2 years. Although life is difficult, there has been some improvement. However, one day, they finally received a piece of news that made them happy. The long missing ship actually appeared in the port, and most of the cargo on the ship was intact. This miraculous news filled the family with joy. The 5 brothers announced that their lives among the villagers are finally over, and their destiny is about to change. Camille carefully packed the saddle for her father. The other children were knights, accustomed to their father's travels. The only thing they care about is their long-awaited gift. As her father rode away, Camille stood alone in front of the cabin on the sun-dappled forest path, waiting. Until his figure disappeared into the distance, a strange doubt filled her heart. Still, she didn't want to sneak up on him. As Laurent's children waited in the hut, they expected their father to bring home the fortune and status with great anticipation. Laurent came to the port city with the expectation of regaining his wealth and status. Although he experienced great losses, the ship's cargo provided him with new opportunities. He daydreamed about spices, silks, and other goods he might import in the future. However, when he reached the port, his dream was shattered. Although most of the cargo was intact, one word spread quickly about his good fortune. His creditors have moved quickly to allocate goods to pay off his many debts. Laurent tried in vain to contact the merchants and ask for an extension on the considerable bill. In the end, although he was freed from the shackles of debt, he returned empty-handed and could not bring back any gifts for his family. He was so depressed that he didn't even want to spend the night on the town. Laurent mounted his tired horse again and returned along the path that had brought him that morning. As night fell, a storm suddenly struck. Lightning and thunder roared around him, and strong winds ruthlessly blew down tree branches. Laurent's horse was frightened and ran around, leading him into an unfamiliar forest. He realized too late that he had made a foolish decision to travel that night. The Lord sought any form of shelter from the high winds. In the forest, Laurent found a cave. His horse was wandering in the fierce wind, and the time was lost. Finally, he saw a tall stone wall appear in front of him. He urged his horse forward, hoping that he had reached a place where he could take refuge. As he got closer, however, he realized it was not a house, but the walls of an estate. A tall and majestic iron door was slightly open. Without time to be polite, Laurent dismounted, pushed the heavy swinging door, and entered the manor beside the forbidden wall with hope. He saw that the huge iron door was open, and no one was at the door. Laurent passed through the door with his horse and slowly walked up a paved walkway, disappearing into the darkness. The leaves were flying in all directions, and the rain was hitting Laurent from all directions. He could barely see the massive structure ahead, but he could feel its majestic approach. Many large rooms with tall windows loomed in the rainy night. It's a scary place for a sudden intruder. However, he had no choice. He was afraid of not having a roof over his head, unable to safely tie his horse inside for the night. He came to a huge front door, raised the iron knocker, and listened to the sound echoing in the glue, as if in response to thunder. When no one responded, he took a deep breath and pushed the door inward with all his weight. He almost fell to the floor by the gate. Lying on the cold stone floor, it took him a while to recover. In the eerie silence, he could still hear the rain pounding on the front steps through the cracks in the tall door, and thought how glad he was that he had found shelter for his horse. In the semi-darkness, he saw a grand reception area with a curving staircase rising on either side. Armored sentries stand here, with a beautifully carved double door in front. The silence in the house might have just dropped a pin. After a few minutes, a light shone around the crack of the door in front of him. He took a deep breath, walked to the lighted room, and slowly opened the door. There was a roaring fire in the cave-like fireplace in the room, and a few simple dishes, a kettle, and a large glass were placed on the table. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the overstuffed chairs and books piled haphazardly on the table. However, there was no sign of the owner. Laurent sat awkwardly in an armchair and waited for a while. Soon his eyes were drawn to the smell of bread and roasted meats on the supper table before him. The aroma tortured him, and after a few minutes, his stomach made a loud growling sound. No one showed up. Soon, he allowed his hunger to overcome his embarrassment, sat down at the table, started with a slice of bread, and then slowly finished the entire meal. An hour passed as he fell into contented silence. Perhaps he thought his master was not at home and was somewhere else hiding from the storm. Elsewhere, he drank a large glass of the delicious liquid. Hungrily, I finished the rest of my dinner. He told himself that Leona wasn't here, and he could explain himself in the morning. After finishing all the food, Laurent happily leaned back in his chair and drank the remaining contents of his water bottle, making a spluttering sound. With warmth in his eyes, he took out the last drop of water from the big cup. Laurent took out the letter about the found cargo ship from his pocket. Just now, he had been full of hope. But now, his dream was shattered. He dropped the letter on the table again and pushed it away. Unknowingly, the letter fell into a small box. Deep sleep music played, and I slept all night without dreaming. When he woke up in the morning, he took a moment to remember where he was. The fire that had been burned long ago and the plates and glasses it was used for were still on the table the night before. His master has not come home yet. He felt embarrassed about entering a stranger's home without being invited. His embarrassment got the better of him. Rather than wait for his master's return, Laurent decided to sneak out of the house quietly and hit the road as quickly as possible. After all, he told himself, this dinner would be wasted anyway. Laurent rose from his cushioned chair and crossed the room, opening the double doors. Faint light shone from the entrance into the serious corridor. This gave me a clearer view than the night before, when I walked into the foyer consciously. He found himself tiptoeing between wary armors, as if they might come alive at any moment and block his path. He looked around at the 2 carved staircases. He noticed that their carpet runners seemed neglected and old, as if no one had lived there for a while. He walked gently across the stone slabs to the huge front door. He reached out and grabbed the door handle, which he pulled with all his strength. The door slowly opened again, revealing a foggy courtyard outside. He pushed himself through the gap and closed the door behind him. He adjusted his vest. It felt wrong for him to try to control some dignity and escape his forbidding refuge like a thief in the night. However, he tried to put the entire humiliating journey behind him. He hurried back to the alcove and tied his horse there. The night before, he was overjoyed to find her. He reached back into the saddle to feed her an apple he had left over from the supplier Camille had packed for him, then untied the horse and led her quietly. He walked all night along the stone path that he had walked on in the wild wind at night. Then he looked back behind him, and he saw a mansion rising darkly in the gradually brightening daylight. It was a huge beige rectangular castle with high and narrow windows arranged on 2 large floors, and seemed to strictly control them. Seemed to be looking down at him. The densely packed chimneys on the sloping tile roof hide the majestic castle from view. He led the horse toward the front door and saw overgrown gardens on either side. Nearing the end, he came across a particularly charming gazebo filled with roses, a rose bush looming in the bushes in the center of the circular seating area. It was the most beautiful pink rose he had ever seen. He immediately remembered his promise to Camille and resolved to keep it to his youngest daughter. He eagerly began to cut red roses from the bushes. He had a knife in his bag. 1 rose wasn't enough to make up for his reappearance. He will plant them all. He was so focused on his task that he didn't hear the footsteps approaching. However, as he backed away from the flowerless rose bush, he felt that he was being watched. The skin is very rough from the sun. A man looked down at him. Or at least he thought. The man standing in front of him looked like one. But he was furious from beneath the savagery of facial hair, unusually tall and muscular, and clearly unprepared for the he. He was wearing a rumpled linen shirt and breeches, and seemed to have rushed over in a hurry. He looked angry. "What do you think you're doing?" Laurent said, growling loudly like a wolf. He froze in pain, aware of the bouquet hanging from his left hand. He stammered and explained that he didn't think anyone lived here and that he didn't think the roses would be discovered. Then I saw that the man's terrifying expression didn't change at all. He tried to explain that he had promised his daughter some rose linens. The beastly man in the shaft waited in stony silence. If you think carefully about his next words, when he straightened up and said, "You took advantage of my hospitality. You ate my dinner without asking. You slept in my chair. all of that I was willing to overlook, not facing you, but you have now taken every flower from my most precious rose bush, and it means so much to me. There is no other flower like it, and in my opinion, every flower is priceless. I ask you to work hard to compensate me for this." Hearing these words, Laurent felt his heart singing. He shook his head in disappointment and told the man that he could not afford anything and that he had nothing to give. The expressionless host looked at him coldly. "In that case, you have to work to repay your debt." He replied, "I need laborers on my estate." Lawrence looked at him blankly and tried to make another suggestion. "But, sir," he protested, "I have 6 children at home, and I can't stay here with you. What will happen to them?" The man looked unmoved. "Either you work to pay off your debt, or someone in your family has to take your place," he finished, his face unmoved. "Bring your roses. They are of no use to me. Now, go back to your family and make arrangements. I expect you or your replacement to be here within a week. If you don't show up, I'll find you." The dazzling, fierce man turned around and strode toward the house, never looking back. Laurent watched him disappear into the castle. Your aunt sees no other option and tells his children what he did. He didn't know how to do it, but he had to arrange for them to run it in his absence. Maybe when the man loses his temper, he'll understand and won't keep Laurent serving him for too long. As the storm passed, the day lord at his side was able to follow his way back to the main road and continue toward home. He rode steadily, but slowly. It was a great day as he considered the news he would share upon his arrival. The mist has dispersed. In early autumn, my son washed a chair for him. The position of the chair felt very wrong. The birds were singing as if nothing had happened, but his heart was heavy, and he was wondering what would happen next. He came home late that night, and the children greeted him excitedly. After all, they were expecting gifts. Opening and closing his saddlebags, they reached round playfully for the apparel he had sadly promised them, and he gave each of them a rose. Camille holds her rose and smells its fragrance with delight, but his other 5 children demand to see what they really are. Around the crowded kitchen table that evening, Laurent told his children what had happened during his ill-fated trip to the port city, recounting the loss of his remaining fortune and the hatred he now felt for the mysterious owner of the castle. Obligation. When he decided he had to go back and pay off his debt, the 5 eldest siblings were unhappy. They pouted and asked what they would do in his absence. Camille was silent, sitting at the table, her expression unreadable, and she was lost in thought. Finally, she asked everyone to quiet down. Her siblings looked at her in surprise, as Camille wasn't usually one to interrupt. Camille announces that she will return to the castle to take her father's place. Laurel's eyes filled with tears. He protested that he could not and would not allow such a thing to happen. But Camille's sanity is hard to argue with. The father was required to be at home to support the family, but she could survive that, and she had some housekeeping skills that allowed her to do whatever cleaning and cooking she was assigned to do. She came to the conclusion that there was no other reasonable solution, and that was for her to pay off the family debt. To Tony spent a day or two preparing Camille's humble luggage. The rose her father had brought was beginning to wilt, and she pressed it into a book to dry. She wanted to remind herself why she had left home to work for this hateful stranger in a remote and isolated estate. Camille is nervous about leaving everything she's ever known, but she's determined to make her father proud. On the morning of Camille's departure, she and Lord packed her things. They caught a pony, and Laurent knew there was an inn they can spend the night there. The foreign brothers and sisters gathered in front of the hut and isolated them among themselves. They felt both relief and silent admiration. They were happy that they wouldn't have to live alone for too long. It's a somber trip for Laurent and Camille. Their faithful horses slowly pulled them along the road, closer and closer to their destination. As Laurent found the turn off the main road to the castle, his heart began to grow more tense, feeling her father's spirits sinking lower and lower. Camille mustered up the courage to smile, and she said reassuringly, "I'm a capable person, and I'll be fine." He nodded, hoping it was true. Peers inevitably came to the dark entrance of the manor. Laurent knew the time had come to open the door again. He led his horse through the opening and made his way a second time to the formidable mansion. Next, relaxing and soothing music will continue to play, allowing you to continue falling asleep.